What up, everybody? This is Jason, and I'm here with my homie Chris over there, up there, down there, over there. And thank you for coming to see Unchained Cinema, which I think we forgot to even mention in our last video. I think we never even mentioned the name of our channel the entire video. We did, but anyways, this is Bubba Ho-Tep, Don Coscarelli joint from 2002 to 2002. And Bubba Ho-Tep is a cult classic, at least in my opinion. It stars Bruce Cambell, Ash from the Evil Dead movies, and you also have Ossie Davis, who's in tons of movies. Too many to mention, but he's in tons of stuff. Bruce Cambell plays Sebastian Haff, aka Elvis, and Ossie Davis plays JFK. So the way this movie really, is what this movie's really about. If you don't know what this movie's about, I'm not gonna get too deep in the woods because that's what we're gonna do here in a moment, just really talk about the film. But basically, a mummy is sucking the souls out of the asses of old people in this old folks home in like southwestern Texas. And it is the job of Elvis and JFK to fight back against this evil who is sucking the souls out of their compadres' anuses there at the old folks' home. And so as the movie goes on, you start finding out more and more about the Elvis character, Sebastian Haff, who's Bruce Cambell. You find a little bit more about Ossie Davis, who's playing JFK. And then you also realize that this Bubba Ho-Tep, this mummy, is there doing its business, trying to capture as many souls as possible and prolong its life there in, I think, southwestern Texas. The premise is absolutely ridiculous, which is why I think I love it so much, is because you had to be like super high to come up with this concept. I mean, we're talking about like next level, like Bob Marley high, of an old man who says he's Elvis that is actually an Elvis impersonator, next to an old black man who said he's actually JFK and that they dyed his skin. And then they joined forces like some superheroes to take on a Egyptian mummy who was going around killing all their other geriatric friends by sucking the souls out of their anuses. Like, that is not a normal concept that people sit around doing unless you're like really high on drugs. So that's essentially the Cliff Notes version of this movie. Now, there's a lot more to it than that. And if that doesn't get the butts in the seats to watch this movie, I don't know what will. So I will throw it over to you, Chris. And what was your initial thoughts about Bubba Ho-Tep?
Bubba Ho-Tep's a movie that I had on DVD since I think around the time that it came out. I was really big into Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, so I saw Bruce Cambell in something other than those, and I had to jump on it. But I mean, how can you go wrong with a geriatric Tango and Cash made up of Ossie Davis and Bruce Cambell playing, an Elvis impersonator who's actually Elvis, who's impersonating the person he's supposed to be, and a guy who thinks he's JFK, like you said, who has a bag of sand in his head where his brain once was, and they dyed him black because that's how clever they are.
Right.
Now, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, and there is some kind of droll moments in it where things just kind of drag out. But the way it was shot was exceptionally well.
Yes.
And a lot of the stuff I didn't pick up on probably the first 4 or 5 times I watched it. But the last couple of viewings I had, you watch them because they're in an old folks home, and it captures the nuances of old people, kind of the coming full circle, right?
Yes, I agree. That's a good point. Yeah.
because you got, the old people doing childish things. Like you got old girl, she's all like laid up in the iron lung, and the little old lady comes and like basically jacks her glasses, and then like, and the old lady's like, well, shit, what do I do
She's
now?
stuck, right?
I'm
Yeah,
stuck in this
that was,
tube that's
yeah, right, that
breathing
was
for
pretty
me.
funny. Yeah,
Um, and then the time lapses that they had in it, and if this quarantine has taught me anything, life just like goes past you. When I first got to South Korea, I was in quarantine for 14 days, and it was just like that, where it's like
right.
there's this routine that the quarantine facility workers go through, and you just sit there, and it's all motion, and you're just kind of like in bed, because you're lethargic, because you're traveled halfway across the world, you're trying to get your sleep
Sure.
schedule right. So I could really relate to that. um, and then the fact that the first probably half to two-thirds of the movie, the vast majority of the dialogue is his inner thoughts,
That's true.
and I thought that was an
That's a good
interesting
point.
concept.
Yeah. So just to back up a bit, Don Coscarelli is the director of this movie, who is famous for the Phantasm films. He made a name for himself with the Phantasm films, which actually the Phantasm movies 1 and 2 are fantastic films. They're fantastic films, if you will. With the Tall Man, it's a really great '70s horror films. And then he did Kenny and Company. He's done multiple. He did things for the Masters of Horror. So he's been around for a while. Obviously, like what Chris said with Bruce Campbell, Ash from the Evil Dead movies. He was also in a movie called Crime Wave, which I think Sam Raimi did, which is hilarious from the '80s. If you have not seen that, it's pretty hilarious. Then of course he popped up in the Spider-Man movies, the original 3 movies. It has bit parts in there. He's Briscoe County Jr. He was in Burn Notice. I mean, the dude has done a lot. And then he went back and did the Evil Dead TV show. So Evil Dead versus Ash or whatever. So he's been around for quite a while. This is like kind of in a low point of his career, to be honest with you. It wasn't not much going on. 2002, Bruce Campbell had, I think, either just did or was getting ready to do The Man with No Brain, which was like, I guess you could say a passion project for himself. It was like off of a comic book, and I think he directed it and acted in it. It was a pretty low budget and not that great, to be honest. But he either had done this right before Bubba HoTep or right after, and in my opinion, it's pretty forgettable. But in this movie, we also have Daniel Roebuck. Now, Daniel Roebuck's in tons of '80s movies, lots of '90s stuff as well. He is one of the major players in all the Rob Zombie movies. He's currently going to be playing Grandpa Munster in the new Munsters remake movie. That he's going to be in that. He plays in this one of the orderlies, like the funeral home orderlies that come and pick up the dead people as they get picked off by old Bubba HoTep. And there's a couple of funny scenes. I don't know if Chris remembers this, but like they drop the old guy and like he falls down the steps and like rolls out into the grass or something and stuff like that. And they're like, oh God. And they're just like trying to grab it. And it's just like, it's kind of so realistic. It's like, it's not perfect. Mistakes are happening. People make mistakes. Those stuff is actually pretty hilarious. So you have a lot of that going on there. I was going to ask you, Chris. I know you said you've seen it a couple of times. So, what was your first thoughts going into it? Did you know much about it? After you started watching it, were you like, "What in the actual hell am I watching right now?" Like, what were your thoughts? Because this is not a typical horror film, let's say.
No, it kind of took me aback, because you have certain expectations of Bruce Campbell, but once you start to understand this character a little more, it's a little more relatable, and you can still see how it's him, even though it's not his kind of traditional role. But I had no expectations going in. I read the back of the slipcover, and
Mhm.
I was like, this is different. Um, and it's like any Bruce Campbell movie, you kind of have to go in there with, I wouldn't say low expectations, but there's a certain expectation that you go into Bruce Campbell movies. Um, I wouldn't say let's be disappointed, but you get what you get with his movies.
Right. Yeah. So a few things here I thought was good what Don Coscarelli did. I mean, like Chris, you said earlier, like it's shot really well. This is not in the hands of some first time director. Like it's shot beautifully. It's really good camera angles. He does a lot of good stuff in camera. One of the first things I thought I want to mention was the camera speed and the flashing during like different parts of the movie when it's showing like Elvis, JFK, and like what the zombies doing or the Bubba HoTep, and he does all these flashes and slow motion scenes, and it kind of felt like you would think that kind of thing would take you out of the movie, but it felt appropriate in this movie. It did not take you out where we were talking about the previous movies, some of the goofy stuff they were doing with the camera in the movie we just watched, Triangle, and like the way the actress was playing it and stuff. It just kind of took me out of the movie. This one was really hypersensitive with some of the camera angles and like flashing and slow motion that they were doing. It just felt very like appropriate for this world. So I think it just again goes back to a capable director compared to a not a capable director, a director that's still learning their craft or whatever. It didn't feel as authentic, but with Don Coscarelli, it felt really good. I also like the little human touches. I wrote this down of like you said, the old grandma stealing from the other grandma locked in the iron lung. That was interesting. Also, like there's a guy I can't remember his name, but he's like dressed up like Hopalong Cassidy, and when the Bubba HoTep's coming after him, he's like shooting them with his little pop guns.
Asshole,
He's like,
asshole,
yeah,
asshole.
asshole, asshole, and he's shooting them. And then like the first time he kind of like I guess the Bubba HoTep pays him no mind, but then the second time around when he actually comes for him. It doesn't work in his favor, of course, and he dies, and Bubba HoTep gets him, and he's just like, psh, psh, psh. So there's like scenes like that in the movie that really, kind of humanizes everybody and kind of makes you feel like, okay, you know, these old people are really, and they talk about this in the movie, they're really defenseless. There's really nothing they can do to fight this, essentially mummy or like zombie, this like, creature. So they're essentially defenseless to this thing, and that's the reason why he's preying on them because he knows that there's nothing they can do to fend him off. Let me ask you real quick, what did you think about it? I forgot about this character, but the nurse, I can't remember her name, but the nurse is really good in this movie. Like, she shows up in the movie. She plays a minor role. She's in lots of stuff. If you've seen her other movies, you'll know who she is. But she plays the nurse that's like, Elvis's nurse. I thought she had some really interesting scenes with Bruce Cambell. Did you have any thoughts about her? Because she's the only one that really Bruce Campbell's dealing with the entire movie that's not really Ossie Davis.
I thought they had good screen chemistry. The way they
Yes.
exchanged dialogue, and she played a convincing deep South caretaker.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it was not a very big role, but it was an impactful role, if that makes sense.
Yep. I agree.
But
That's kind of what I was thinking.
yeah, just to kind of caveat on what you were saying with how it was shot, it really captured the loneliness and the depression and the despair
Yeah.
and the isolation when he's sitting there in the bed and they have all the fast camera shots, and you really kind of feel like that sense of is this what life is about? Like in the end,
Right.
does it all matter? And I think that was a line from the movie. Is this what life
Right.
is this what life's about?
Right.
um and it's kind of,
Well,
every old person's worst fear is to be left in one of these places where time is passing you by. People don't come to visit, which was a recurring theme because, Bruce Campbell's daughter never came to visit. The guy that lived next to him, his daughter never came to visit until after he was dead. And she just kind of pillaged his stuff and donated the rest to Goodwill.
yeah. And that's what I was gonna say. Like, that scene is the first scene that really starts the movie of his roommate dying. You don't see his death. You just see the aftermath. And then the daughter, who's like in her mid-20s, I guess, shows up to pretty much like just take his stuff and leave. And then, the whole time, the Elvis character slash Sebastian Half is like giving her a hard way to go, basically saying, you were never there for him. You never showed up. You never, came and checked on him. And her argument was, well, he wasn't much of a father. So I don't feel bad about it. And and it was very interesting because exactly like you said, Chris. So many people end up in that same situation. I mean, I that's like one of my worst fears is that I get to an age, I have nobody, to be honest. So like my son is my only person who would ever be willing to take care of me. But maybe I get to a point where I can't really be taken care of. Like he can't take care of me, and like I end up in some place like that. Like that's like seriously a worst fear of mine. And that kind of movie really shows you the unfortunate reality that people find themselves in. So I thought they did a pretty good job of showing you like how shitty it really is, to be honest. So they weren't trying to like glam it up at all. So
Yeah, and the first half of that movie, I'd say, could be categorized as kind of dark comedy,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
dark comedy.
you
Yeah, that
kind
would be it.
of get over the apex on the downslope, and it turns into typical Bruce Campbell comedy. And I thought that
Right,
was a neat transition.
I agree. So talking about transitions and about the comedy, I do find it interesting, and I'm sure you will as a history person, Chris. There's a lot of mixed, half baked uh, conspiracy theories going on in this in history with the whole Bubba HoTep, I guess his history, but also with JFK and Elvis and all this stuff. They take a lot of liberties, as you can expect, because again, this is not a documentary, this is not a docudrama, this is a horror movie that's finding very loose things to kind of tie a story together. But I did find some of the stuff they were talking about pretty hilarious and kind of half baked. What did you take away from that? Because there's quite a few scenes where they're talking about a little bit about their history of who they really were to get to how they are now.
Yeah, I thought the set designer did a good job with Jack's room. Like we said,
Yes,
this guy thinks he's JFK, or maybe he is. I don't know, because by the end of the movie, they're calling, one Elvis and the other one's calling the other one John or JFK.
right.
But you go into his room and he has like all these pictures of like Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald and
Yeah,
mug shots and like um, um, crime scene photos and stuff. So it really is like, okay, this guy really does think he's JFK, and he thinks Lyndon B. Johnson's out to kill him, although LBJ is apparently dead at this point.
right,
Um,
right.
but yeah, they did take little nuggets of truth and kind of add it to the character's story, and I thought that was a neat touch.
Yeah. One of the other guys in the movie is named Reggie Bannister, his real name, and he was the like funeral home director. He pops in a couple times in there whenever there's a problem with the people dying in the funeral home. He also is a huge character actor that's in the Phantasm films. Again, another actor that uh, um, Don Coscarelli uses in all his movies. He plays kind of a bit part in this, but just to make a mention, if you're a fan of Reggie Bannister, he does pop up in this and has a bit role, which I do like. Now, I will say, kind of go back to what we were talking about with the half-baked conspiracy theories and stuff. The stuff that Ossie Davis says in this movie, like he says with such conviction, even though it's so hilarious. Like, I mean, he's talking about how he was essentially assassinated, and they captured him, and they dyed his skin, and they put a bag of sand behind his ear. That's his brain. I mean, the stuff that he's saying. I mean, the stuff that Bruce Campbell says Elvis is pretty silly, but Ossie Davis is like really. I mean, this guy is a legit actor who's been acting since I don't even know how long, since the '60s at least. And some of the stuff he has to say is so just off, just so ridiculous. And the fact that he says it with such conviction, I have to give a standing ovation to Ossie Davis because he said some really outlandish things pretending to be JFK. So,
Both of them did.
Right.
Both of them did. It's like, what are we doing in here in the bathroom, man? He's drawing stick figures on the shithouse walls.
That's really good, dude. That's awesome.
In here.
That's it? I mean, we're investigating a scuttling in the hall, trying to figure out who attacked you last night. You bring me in here to look at stick pictures on the shithouse wall, man?
Look close.
It's Egyptian.
Right, oh Reno. Hey, you're not as stupid as some folks made you out.
Thank you.
Now, I copied this down yesterday. I came in here to take a shit because they hadn't cleaned up my bathroom. Saw that on the wall, took it back to my room, looked it up in my books, and I wrote it all down. Now this top line translates roughly into Pharaoh gobbles donkey goobers, and the bottom line, Cleopatra does the nasty.
Say what?
Well, pretty much that's the best I can translate it.
Well, all right, so one of the nuts in here, the present company excluded, thinks he's Tutankhamun or something, comes in here, writes hieroglyphics on the wall. I mean, big deal, man. What's the connection? Why are we standing here in a toilet?
Well, I don't know what the connection is exactly.
Dude, that's awesome.
And he's like, Cleopatra does the nasty. Stuff like that, man. It had me rolling.
Aussie Davis is saying about the hieroglyphics, like somehow he can read hieroglyphics. It's like, doesn't explain how JFK knows how to read Egyptian, alphabet, but he'll keep saying stuff. It's a rough translation. In my books, that's what it comes across. I'm like, what? Yeah, like, this cracks me up. But I mean, he said there was such conviction. Like, he is not hamming this up. He's not winking, nodding at the camera. It's like, this is like he's expected to get an Oscar on this performance. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, especially when Bruce Cambell was like, "Hey man, so how was Maryland in the sack?" It's like, that's top secret classified information.
Yeah. And then he goes, but off the record, or something like that. He goes, what? It's just like, oh geez. So yeah. A couple of things I want to also talk about was the practical effects. Don Coscarelli did not do any serious CGI in this movie. If you know Coscarelli's style, he's not a CGI kind of director anyways. All the effects, to my knowledge, were all in camera, special effects. There was some lighting and stuff with the Bubba HoTep, with some of that kind of stuff going on. But everything's in camera like they do. I watched some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it's a real guy in a real costume walking around pretending to be Bubba HoTep, and they do some characters. They might do some CGI stuff with the face to make it a little bit more like alive or whatever. But I mean, it's really going on, which I really like the practical effects in this movie, which I'm always a big fan of. I don't care how big budget the movie is. If the director spends the extra little bit of time to do some practical effects, you're chasing after my own heart when you do that. So I appreciate those kind of things. One of the other things I wanted to say was I thought, like you said, Chris, the one-liners were in this movie hilarious. There were so many. If you go back and watch this movie and just have a drinking game of when Bruce Cambell or Ossie Davis said something so ridiculous, like one of their one-liners, you'd be drunk in like the first 30 minutes of the movie probably, because there's a whole lot of ridiculousness going on in this. So, oh man, okay. What about you, man? What were some of your thoughts about the movie in general? I talked about the special effects, talked about some of the minor actors that going on. What were some of your thoughts about the movie overall?
I'd say overall, I mean, you don't really capture everything the first time because there's a lot of moving pieces in there. And if you don't see it for a long time, you might have to watch it a couple times again,
Yes.
as I had to do, just to kind of piece everything together. And there was still some, and maybe I just missed it, kind of how, the old guy, the guy that was dressed like Hopalong Cassidy or whatever you said. how he knew that the bus went over the bridge, and because he kept saying
Yeah.
this, kept saying this, and then somehow that jogs something in Elvis's mind, and he gets on his walker and he's trying to go down the side of the hill to get to the the base of the river, and he finds the bus under the
Right.
water. It's like I never figured out how the old guy knew that that bus was there, or like that's kind of how the crux of all this. Uh,
Right.
but what was the other thing I had? You talked about the practical effects. It was in the same light as kind of Army of Darkness, Evil Dead, like when the
Sure. Yeah.
scarab bit her hand, and
Yeah, that's a good point.
how the gash looked and the blood. So I was wondering if Sam Raimi had a part in this, but I don't think he did. But
Yeah,
that
probably not, but yeah, it had a lot of that vibe though. Very, very like a very Evil Dead kind of some stuff going on in there. With yeah, I agree. I did find it also hilarious that during at the very end of the movie, I'm sure you remember, they're using the hieroglyphics as the Bubba Hotep's talking, and it's like saying ridiculous stuff. Like obviously these hieroglyphics don't make any sense in real life. It's just like he's speaking, and then it has like these subtitles of the words he's using, and they're just using these like random like Egyptian hieroglyphic figure signs or whatever, and it's just like saying stuff like "I hope you suck a dead donkey's dick" or something like that. And it's just like that kind of stuff, and you're like, what? And it just cracks me up because it's like he spent the time on the graphics and of this character like saying like ludicrous stuff to the Bruce Cambell character, and he's trying to whoop his butt out in the woods by himself and stuff. It just, I mean, like it's just so ludicrous. I mean, seriously, the movie has so many ridiculous scenes in it and this overall vibe, but it does, for whatever reason it works.
You talked about Ossie Davis and his convictions in this movie, and it's a
Yes,
small little element, but the way he controls his radio operated wheelchair, or the remote control wheelchair, he does it so deliberately and with such passion.
yes,
I can't even like describe, and you would have to see it, but when you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Everything he does in that chair is just deliberate, and it
yeah.
adds to the dialogue that he's saying.
Yeah, I agree. Like I'm telling you, Ossie Davis decided to show up. He read the script. He definitely knew what he was getting himself into. But he treated this, and this is one of his last roles, by the way. Like he passes away not too long after this movie comes out. But he takes this role very serious. I mean, he's having fun. Don't get me wrong. He's not thinking this is the Citizen Kane of horror movies or anything like that, but he is having a good time making this dialogue work. And if you ever want to see a movie and try to understand how an actor who doesn't make the dialogue work and an actor who can make a dialogue work, even ridiculous dialogue, then this movie's perfect for that. Because seriously, Ossie Davis reads these lines or like says these lines, and you're just like, oh my gosh. Like anybody else says some of this stuff, you're just like, oh, it's, as the kids would say, this is so cringy. And he says it, and you're like, okay, all right, I believe it because he believes it, and that says a lot about his ability as an actor. So, but overall, for me at least, I know we've already kind of alluded to it. This is a great movie. I love Bubba Ho-Tep. It's a lot of fun. It's a movie that's like maybe even not even an hour and a half long, if that. It's over so fast. But it's a good way to spend a little bit of time. And it's something you'll never see probably before, nothing after. It's very unique, and it's in this movie. Uh, some really good performances, like we talked about with Ossie Davis. Bruce Campbell does a really good job because he's playing basically one or two different characters, maybe even three, possibly you could even say, characters in this movie. So that's really good. And like we talked about, the way it was shot, the way it was, the special effects and all that by Coscarelli did a great job. So yeah, for me overall, I mean, even the creature, the Bubba Ho-Tep creature, looked good in this. It definitely has a very southwestern Texas vibe,
That was
or
another thing
whatever
I
it's
couldn't
supposed to
figure out
be.
is why he was wearing like the cowboy hat and the cowboy boots.
Right. Yeah, this is not your typical Egyptian mummy. Don't get it. It is a Bubba HoTep. It's one of them Bubba HoTeps. So yeah, I mean, it's yeah. I remember there was a local video shop in Louisville, Kentucky, where I'm from, and they had a poster for this back in 2001 or whatever when it was about ready to come out, and I was like, Bubba HoTep, what does that even mean? And I couldn't wrap my mind around what I was even trying to watch. And I had a friend of mine who had seen the movie or had heard about it, or that he got a screener. I don't even know. And he was like, "Dude, it's hilarious." And I'm like, I don't know about that. But like I said, when I watched it when it came to hit video. I watched it and I was like, you know what? This is actually pretty funny. So I highly recommend it if you want to watch a movie where it's not gory, it's not mean spirited. It's definitely silly. Like Chris said earlier, it's like a black comedy or a dark comedy in a lot of scenes. There's nothing intense or scary about this movie. It's all done with really lighthearted, silly type of, horror, so to speak. But if you've not seen it, I would highly recommend it. What about you, Chris?
No, absolutely. I'd say it's a solid 8 out of 10 at least, and it's
Yeah.
worth at least one watch.
Yeah, I would say 8 out of 10 too. Yeah. And it's definitely worth a watch. I mean, and we talked about this, but you can watch this movie. I had it on VH, or I had it on DVD, but you can watch it in a couple of different ways. I mean, I know you can watch it for free, or you could have about a week or two ago on one or two different streaming services online. So, this is not a movie that should be too difficult to track down. So, anyways, if you all had seen the movie, let myself and Chris know what your thoughts are about it. We're definitely interested to see what you all think, good, bad, or the ugly about this movie. But I think a lot of people do really enjoy this movie. So yeah, that's kind of like, I guess, where I'm at with it. Do you have any final thoughts, Chris? Anything to wrap it up?
Nope.
If you like zombies, you like hillbilly zombies, you like hillbilly mummies, you like Elvises, you like black JFKs, this movie's for you. And you get all that in this movie. Like, there's not any other movie that's out there that you're going to get a Bubba HoTep, a fake Elvis, who may not be fake, a black JFK, and a phantasm director all in the same movie making it. So it just screams, please watch me. So with that being said, guys, Bubba HoTep, a Don Coscarelli joint, came out in the year 2002. And for myself and for Chris, we hope you all enjoyed. And definitely look forward to comments and thoughts below. And until next time, thank you for watching.